Welcome back, everybody. For those of you guys who are just joining us for the first time, welcome to the show. I think it's only like one person in chat at the moment, but
Yeah, fine.
So, how have you been?
Oh, busy. A lot of driving. Did my taxes this week.
Yeah, oh yeah. Gosh, I always forget. Like literally every day from January 1st till April 14th, I'm like, all right, I got to do my taxes. I got to get on that. Hey, Tanya, how you doing? Every day. And I'm like, come on, taxes, do your taxes. Eddie, just get up and do your taxes. And then meanwhile, April 10th rolls around and I'm like, have I still not done my taxes yet?
Well, I knew I was going to have to owe. I was going to pay, and so that's why it was planned delay. If you know you're getting money back, you do it in February or January or whatever. But I knew I was going to have to pay, so I delayed. I was hoping that maybe IRS would just go away, abolish the IRS.
Did you see that? There's a meme going around that's like people like me thinking about, should I do my taxes or maybe Doge gets to IRS next?
Yeah. Yeah. I was on board with that. But yeah, it hurt. I owed a lot. So, he was like, did you make any major purchases? Anything I could buy a car for your business or something like that? I was so poor last year. It was just pouring money and trying to get out of credit card debt.
Yeah.
We didn't do any major purchases. We did a few this year, but that'll just help for next year. But
right.
Yeah, so I had a hard year.
Sorry to hear that. Well,
but I guess that's my civic responsibility. When I had a bad year, I ended up not paying taxes. This year I paid some taxes, so now I can. Now I'm eminently qualified to tell the government what they're doing wrong with my money.
That's right.
So
that's the rule,
I have
right?
Some credentials now. Yeah.
That's right. If you pay your taxes, if you vote, then you have the right to complain, right? And that's the game. I'll tell you, I'm kind of fortunate in that all of my jobs are self-employment job. Well, I'm fortunate in one way, unfortunate in another. In on the downside, theoretically I'm supposed to file quarterly. I usually don't. I usually do it every semi-annually, like that kind of thing. But on the upside, there's so many write-offs, and I don't have to count my revenue until after all of my expenses, right? Because it's just all part of the same bag. And then the plus side is that Trump's standard deduction was huge for me. It was enormous. Believe it or not, it's funny that a lot of people talk about when they talk about the tax cuts that the Republicans usually implement, Trump in particular, they always say tax cuts for the rich. That's just the buzz phrase, right? It's like tax cuts for the rich, tax cuts for the rich. And the truth is, if you do any kind of tax cut, unless you specifically carve out the rich are going to get the best end of that deal because they're the ones that pay the most taxes, right? So unless you specifically say this is a tax cut for anybody but the rich, then they're gonna.
They talk about the rich in this sort of straw man way, but really, it's small businesses, other things, and what they don't realize, a lot of people because we just want to. The American dream is to be independent. Be financially independent, right?
Yeah.
And out of that, right? That's the new American dream. And a lot of people you have 4 or 5 really good years, and then you're sort of coasting off that. And if you tax those 4 or 5 really good years at spike, it really makes it tough.
Yeah.
And so, they think we're still a bunch of Gilded Age plutocrats who are making money off sugar plantations of exploited slave labor or something, when it's really. So I had my best year ever last year, right? Praise the Lord.
Nice.
Praise the Lord. But it's hard to have that stretch out and help me over bad years, because when I have a good year, the government takes so much more. It's harder to even
right.
It's just,
but yeah. Well, so what I was going to say.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to say though is that regardless of the buzzwords, regardless of the game that's being played in propaganda, this particular tax cut was overwhelmingly not for the rich. This was the standard deduction increase, probably on average helped each working class family by like this enormous margin, right? It's one of the reasons that Biden and Kamala Harris never touched it. Like this tax cut went in, they had a chance to change it. They didn't bother, right? Because it was just something that was good for yeah. So one of the things, of course, we'll probably end up talking about today is tariffs, right? And Mansing has begun on the path
Well,
saying it.
I just wanted to say one last thing, just that I still my still big problem is I hate property taxes. They're the worst. Right? Once we have property, we're just trying to live, especially on our primary residence, like having to continue to pay to maintain that property, like
Right.
anyway, that's the type of thing, like we never feel like we can get ahead of it. But
yeah, it's tough. Yeah, Christian, real quick, make sure you give me
I'm getting a little bit too much of the ceiling. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
right.
and I actually look taller than you for a change, which I was kind of digging.
Yeah, I was doing that on purpose. All right. So Trump is hoping that we can have more revenue from tariffs so that we can lower, right, at least federal taxes. We'll see. Every state's going to handle property taxes and other taxes differently. We'll see that. I mean, ideally, right, if we had anywhere between 3 and 8% revenue tariffs, that's when it's just like, right, you're not blocking access or like these 100% or even 50% tariffs. Those are sort of blocking tariffs, but you have these lower, they're called revenue tariffs. If everybody did that, we'd be fine. It's just right. It's still, we're starting to sort out when other countries have 200% of really high tariffs for certain industries to protect their own industries from American competition. We should be able to, they've started a trade war. They've started a tariff war. We just have failed to respond until now.
Right.
But Trump has the big news, right? Stock market went way up today because Trump sort of turned around on a lot of things. We'll see. I don't know what negotiations he's having or what things he's hearing. And I think coming from a Republican side is, yes, our heart is really not in high tariffs. But he would just like other countries to see the light and see the fairness that they shouldn't have crazy high tariffs on American products.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess I know there's like 6 or 8 countries that have already come back to the table, right, and said that we're happy to negotiate 0% across the board.
Vietnam.
Yeah, I don't know if that's I still can't figure Trump out. Like, I honestly don't know what he's shooting for, right? It's funny because Man says he wants to maybe replace taxes with tariffs. I don't know if that's the end. Like, I don't know if that's what he's trying to do. I don't know if the game is to just get everybody to, like, because he says reciprocal tariffs. Like, is he trying to just get everybody to come back to the table and then stop, or does he want to like keep a certain amount of revenue like type tariff in forever?
I think his goal is that as a business, if you want to manufacture something in the U.S., that has to be viable. But if you see like, okay, I'm going to manufacture a product in the U.S., but if I want to sell it in India, I'm faced with these really high tariffs.
Right.
But if I manufacture it in Indonesia and sell it in India, I'm still selling it in India. India doesn't tariff products from Indonesia for some reason. They only tariff them from the United States. So as an investor, I want to invest in a place. If I'm trying to make a product for India, it doesn't make a sense for me to manufacture here in the United States. And that's what he wants to create. This goes back to what I think the primary goal of the federal government is. You can't create wealth or create prosperity, but you want to create a social structure or legal structure framework where prosperity can take place. Right? It's sort of even, right? So you can't force industries, but if he sees that, hey, he's an investor and he'd want to start a business, but he sees there are these major blocks. Oh, I don't want to manufacture this product because if I try to sell it in Europe, it gets tariffed really high. Or if I try to sell it in Canada, which would be the easiest to transport to, they have these blocks. So now all of a sudden, what that does is you say, all right, I want to make a product to sell in Canada. Who does Canada not tariff? Oh, they don't care if Mexico.
Right.
Boom. I'm building my factory in Mexico, right? Rather than Texas, rather than Missouri, right? And I think that's the type of stuff at a moral he would like to do. Is tariffs the right tool to do that? You know, obviously a lot of people say no, and classically we would say no. But it has gotten a lot of attention. It's made people talk about tariffs for the first time in a long time. And hopefully other countries are having these debates and their politicians are having to justify, well, why are we tariffing the United States so high when they're an ally? Doesn't it seem unfair? Why should we expect them to not tariff our stuff? I mean, if you get people in India to ask their political leaders, okay, we don't like a 27% tariff on our stuff being sold in America, but why are we tariffing their stuff?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, right. We've at least started some of those conversations, and I don't know that that the countries across the sea are like all of a sudden bemoaning the fact that they have been getting the better end of the deal all this time. I think it's more been hey, why can't we keep doing this? You know, I'm sure they all would like to continue that. But my question though is, I mean, Trump seems he's very wishy-washy right now. Like, to me, it feels like just create a plan, stick to it, right? Stick to your guns, unless, like, if your plan is to relent after, somebody changes their tariff plan, then be clear about that from up front. Say, like, I want reciprocal tariffs. If you drop yours, I'll drop mine, and then it's that clear, right? But don't say, all right, I'm going to put this extra blanket 25% tariffs in no matter what. But then when the time comes, it's like, I don't feel like it. Then it's like back and forth. And yeah, so the market goes up, the market goes down, the market goes back up again, the market goes back down again, because nobody can figure out what he's trying to do. I can't figure out what he's trying to do. I don't know what his plan are. I mean, we can all
negotiation. It's negotiation, and it's true. It's sort of like if in war, if you telegraph to the enemy exactly where you're going to bomb, right? Yeah, you'll blow up that building, but you're not going to achieve your military objectives necessarily. So, there has to be a little bit of, he did communicate. This is something he has talked about, to his credit, well before he entered politics. Sure. This has been a pet peeve. All through this campaign this year, he talked about wanting to do this, wanting to try this policy, right? And so it's not really surprising that he's trying to. Now, somebody has his ear, obviously, today. Somebody that he trusts, somebody's made an argument. Maybe he's watched Common Mansplaining and some of the things he said
I'm sure
have reverberated through. If you're out there, Trump, this is the place to watch. But somebody's finally to get him off the ledge of at least extreme, tariffs and not use them as somewhat of a last resort rather than a first resort. I do think standing up to China in a lot of ways was something he was the first president willing to do on economic issues. The Democrats reluctantly said that was the right policy and that Biden was going to try to continue that. And so the trade, maybe tariffs in this sort of escalating trade war is the right way to deal with China, but maybe other countries are more reasonable. Hey, come to us and let's talk, rather than treating every country the same as he wants to treat China.
Right. One of the things that I've been trying to figure this out for like the past couple of weeks now, and maybe somebody from the audience can help me, is, I'm the free trade guy, right? I'm the guy who doesn't like tariffs. Like, I'm the guy who's supposed to be arguing against them. But the weird thing is, I keep talking to like Democrat after Democrat, liberal after liberal, who's telling me how horrible they are. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is exactly what you're supposed to want, right? This is all a tariff is a tax that you place on corporate activity, specifically corporate activity from the ultra rich, who are so rich, in fact, that they can afford buying stuff from other nations and bringing it here en masse, right? Like, not your mom and pop stores that are only making like $1 million a year. We're talking people that are making, 50, 100 million a year or more, and are literally shipping it in on boats here into the nation.
It
So
is
like
macro, yeah.
this is the thing that the Democrats have wanted to tax from for as long as I can remember, for like the last 50 years. They're like, we need, instead of these tax cuts for the rich, we need more taxes for the rich, and to like take all of the money out of the people who are rich and then redistribute. And the funny thing is now they're giving me the answers that I've been giving them all along. They're like, oh no, if we do this, they'll just adjust their prices and the consumer will pay the cost. Well, I've been saying that for 50 years while they wanted to tax the rich. Like when I remember when Affordable Care Act came in, and my people were all saying, all my employees were like, oh, we're saved, we're all going to have free healthcare. I'm like, no, the company is just going to cut your hours. Watch. And like that's exactly what happened, right? Like the companies always adjust for the pressures that the government places on it. The magic doesn't happen because of what the government does or doesn't do. The magic happens if you like create an environment that is more conducive to.
As labor costs go up, like higher minimum wages, other things like that, what you do is you get more automation. And this is like Mr. Singh talking about how manufacturing in the USA isn't profitable. Well, it depends on what your profit. If it's something that can be highly automated, right? There's a lot of ways different profit, especially if it's something high tech. We feel like in our national security, we need to be able to. We rely so much on high tech. We need to have some of that stuff here.
Right.
But
Or
some
if
of
it's
those things,
material.
if it can be highly automated, the production of it, then it's really just sort of shipping or logistics or product improvement ideas, things that can be done here. We'll see.
Yeah. And I mean, there is I don't know what the what the magic like perfect unemployment number is. I mean, I think conventional wisdom puts it somewhere around 5%, right? And we're pretty close to that. So like maybe I wouldn't mind having zero unemployment. That'd be nice, but I don't know if that's even what's healthy. Like I think after you get down to a certain level, it's like bad for you or something. But yeah, I mean, as we get more and more people, because it's not like we've stopped immigration altogether, we've just slowed it down a lot. As we get more and more people, we're going to still need to find more and more jobs for everybody. I don't see any problem with bringing some more manufacturing jobs back home to America. I don't have any problem with that. I do worry though that we do it at the expense of free trade, of course. But honestly, if Trump's goal is to recover free trade, like if that's his goal, I'm all on board because I don't see another way to do it, right? I don't have another. One of the things that I noticed about this thing that I keep hearing from like Democrats, they're all like kind of like armchair politicians, right? It's easy to like shoot problems in other people's policies, right? Like you can just sit there and be like, that sucks, that sucks, that sucks, that sucks. You guys all suck. But then like, I'm sitting here like, okay, what would you do to bring manufacturing back? What would you do to get other nations to capitulate and have even tariffs? And they're all like, then it's like crickets. Chirp, chirp.
Burrito. Yes.
Yeah. It's like, never mind all that. Whatever Trump does sucks. I'm like, okay,
Yes.
all right, okay.
What are the alternatives, right? Yes, what we're saying, the trade war has already started. Other countries, we just haven't responded. So, we're now talking about it's a global conversation. It's a conversation we're having with our allies. We'll see where it's disrupting. We'll see where it goes. Yes, the markets like to be able to project things out. So the markets are going crazy because they don't know what to project, and that's what we got to ride. I'm not. The elites are more concerned with that. I don't have a ton of money in the stock market, and so I'm more prone to be patient, or that's a secondary concern for me. But
here's what. Well, to be fair, like we've been talking about tariffs for what was this, the third week now or fourth week or something, and I do kind of want to pivot a little bit to our topic of the day, which is supposed to be transgenderism and how it has turned into essentially the battle line of the new ideological split, right? Um, One of the things that I've been noticing as I'm in a lot of debate forums and a lot of like religious forums and political forums, we talk about this kind of stuff all the time. What's really fascinating to me, and Tanya, who's watching, will be able to confirm this, is that there's this unique ideological composite that seems to be almost identical for a lot of different people. Like for example, if you are atheist, you are also seemingly most likely on the left. You're seemingly also most likely a moral relativist. Like you're seemingly, it's like all this stuff just goes together, right? And the converse is true too. If you're a person who believes in God, you usually are more conservative on average. You're usually more like, there's like all this stuff goes together. And so that's
Socially
always,
conservative, yes.
say again?
Socially conservative.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, well, socially and often fiscally too, but it's like, but not as much, but it's like all this stuff seems to go together, which is amazing to me, right? Now Trump has shifted things a little bit because he's kind of like a wrench, but one of the things that I've noticed though is that with that composite, right, with that these like constellations of ideas, some of these ideas aren't even necessarily congruent with each other. But one of the let's see, yeah. So Tanya says, find the balance and you find the resolution. Boy, it is a tough one for me. This is among all of the different beliefs, the belief that there isn't objective morality is one of the hardest to reconcile as a people's. And one of the reasons for that, we're going to go, I was just getting to this. One of the reasons for that is because in the abstract, if you are not a moral objectivist, in other words, if you don't believe in an objective framework for morality, some constant, unending, unchanging moral code, then ultimately you have no moral power. You have no moral duty to compel, right? So you can't.
You just have self-interest, naked
Right.
self-interest.
It's just a bunch of. I don't know if you guys are in the audience are familiar with the is ought problem. So the is ought problem is that you can't get an ought from an is. In other words, if all you have is a statement like the grass is green, you can't turn that into the grass should be green or the grass ought to be green, right? There's no way to get there. Scientifically, logically, it's impossible. And the same thing goes for beliefs with regard to religion and things like that. Like if I were to say, somebody is transgender, I can't get from them that to they ought to be transgender or they ought not be transgender, for example. I have to have something else on the side telling me what they ought do, right? And so what the problem is without God, you don't ever breach that gap. You never go from is to ought. You just have a bunch of is statements. Right. And so like what happens is with that group, you'll have a lot of these situations where like you can pick a law, any law, like theft, murder, whatever. And there will never actually be a reason that a person that isn't of faith can tell you why you oughtn't do those things. There'll be like interim reasons, things that they think are answers, right? Things that it'll hold up for a moment, but then after you scrutinize it for a while, it ends up being written on sand. And I'll give you a good example, right? Someone will say, like, for example, well, I think we ought not murder. And if let's say they don't believe in God, they don't have any kind of moral pillar to hold that down to. All right. So then I'll say, okay, why shouldn't you murder people? Well, people don't like being murdered. It's bad for humans. Okay, well, why are humans valuable? Well, because I think they are. Right. And it gets down to you get back to the beginning of their moral code, and it ends up just being, well, because this is my personal preference. Right. I personally prefer that humans have more well-being.
You can get beyond that. You can see like if we're living in societies and everybody's worried about somebody murdering themselves or murder is their primary concern. Everybody's armed to the teeth. Everybody's actions are all dictated by avoiding murder and being able to murder other people. And it will restrict commerce. It will restrict your ability to grow. It will restrict your wealth. You'll become a very, very poor people, and until you have certain things come together. So
but then the question would be, why do you need wealth? Why is wealth important? Ultimately, you get back down to this place where you say, well, because I just want it. Ultimately, there's nowhere else to go. After someone scrutinizes it enough, no matter how many games you play, no matter how many like rhetorical tricks you throw in the way, ultimately you get back out into this corner where you have to say, because I feel so, because I wish, because I desire, because I prefer. And there's nothing else to do. Now the people of faith do something similar, but the one step different that they take is instead of I feel, because God says so. right? And that's the big difference. And when the big difference between those two is that when God says it, he says it once and he says it for all time. But whereas you say it, you can change your mind. And that happens all the time in human life, human society, right? And so what happens is like you'll have situations where thousands of years ago, we all felt like slavery was fine, right? Everybody did it. It was ubiquitous. There was never a big deal, right? But thousands of years ago, people would throw babies in pits to find the rain gods and to make sure that the rains came. And it was no big deal because that's, and these are still for well-being, right? This is still for a group of people who says, I want society to thrive. And to do that, we need rain. And to do that, we need to throw a baby in a pit.
Yeah.
Right now, today we can look at that.
On the idea of Christianity was instrumental in changing the West, at least in the West, the idea of the value of human life.
Yes.
And the idea of that slavery was anathema to the value of human life embedded in inherent to Christianity started with St. Gregory in the 3rd century, but even then it said, well, but they had no hope of when slavery could end, right? We hoped in the modern age that it would officially be ended, but we still see we know what happens today, but that Christian peoples should legally try to abolish it. But here's the issue that when it comes down to transgenderism, they feel like they feel that they're being moral in their attitude towards it. That it's just idea of being kind or being compassionate, being nice to people, right? Now we know God is every culture has had taboos. Every culture with a deity, every culture that's advanced beyond to the form of having writing and civilizations that we know about has had taboos about men acting like women, women acting like men, and for good reasons, right? That it's important to acknowledge the realities and the differences in the sexes, and to value those things properly. Like women, societies that want to perpetuate have to value their women certain ways, and value their men certain ways, and have expectations for them. And when people start saying, "Oh, I like how society treats this other sex, the expectations of this other sex better. I just want to switch teams."
Yeah.
No, right? That might seem more, like a better life for you, but that's not reality. That's not right. And so everybody sort of accepted that. It doesn't matter if you would prefer to be a woman. If you're a man, sorry, that's one of the just things you have to accept. Women have it better. Or women say, "Oh, men have it so much better. I wish I was a man." You say, "Well, that's tough. Yeah, men do have it better, but you're just going to have to accept your life as women." But in postmodernism, and with right, it's sort of like our Jurassic Park power of surgery and medical things and clinics. It's now we can try to change your body so that you can make the charade happen, and that's an abomination. I mean, that really is, and we need to call that out. And it's something that really every society has mocked, and it's called an abomination and it's ridiculed. But now in the 21st century, they want to enforce insanity, right? They want to enforce everybody to accept, right, something that every advanced society has said is, even in very small numbers, is something that's contrary to civilization. That we have to accept this. That it's moral or it's immoral for us to call a transgender person by their biological sex, right? That we're being cruel, we're being uncompassionate. And I think
a lot to unpack here.
All right. So let's see what do people say.
Yeah, so let's go through some of the comments because a lot of this bears on the same thing. Let's start with Tanya says that she contemplates this all the time. Subjective truths are real. and they're objective to your reality. So it is a paradox. It is true that there are objective truths about your subjective preference, right? For example, if I were to tell you it is true that my favorite color is blue, that would be an objective truth about well, I could be lying to you. It might not be but assuming I'm not lying, assuming my favorite color is in fact blue, then it would be an objective truth about my subjective preference. My preference is for the color blue, right? But the truth is that my preference is for the color blue. But I don't think that that's a paradox. I just think that there are tons of things that you can have objective truths about, and tons of things that are objective truths of their own nature, right? For example, I don't think that somebody would ever say it's a preference that 2 + 2 is 4, right? And one of the things that people forget about the transgender situation is that it is actually just based on math, right? This is a chromosomal count, right? I know it seems like that's very reductive, but one of the oh yeah, the leather jacket, right? Fonzie. JC says you're very Fonzie.
It was a little cool today, yes.
So one thing that I'd like to do today too is I'd like to define what I believe the accurate definition of male and female is, because I think a lot of people get tripped up on this too. A male is one who is ordered toward the impregnation of the opposite gamete, right? And a female is one who is ordered toward pregnancy. Now, that doesn't mean, for example, that they actually do get pregnant or that they are currently pregnant, but that they are ordered for it. It's a teleological distinction, right? So one of the things that I see people do is play a lot of games in there saying, well, what about women that have that get into an accident and can no longer be pregnant? I'm like, that's doesn't change the fact that she was ordered toward it, right? And so it escapes a lot of the rhetorical games that people play. Now, insofar as it goes, even things like intersex edge cases are still able to be very neatly placed in those two boxes. Even intersex people can either become pregnant or ordered toward becoming pregnant, or ordered toward impregnating others. Even if they, end up with aspects of both sexes, they can still very easily be placed in either one or the other box, but not both. You will never have someone, for example, that can impregnate themselves.
Yeah.
Right. You'll never have that.
That's
scientifically just never exists. Now, when you realize those biological truths, it's not that someone has to accept that. They don't have to like it, right? They don't have to psychologically be happy about it. There's and I would, one thing that I tell people over and over again, it's not that I'm telling people that they can't do what they want as an adult, right? I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. You do you, I'll do me, right? And likewise, I'm not telling you that, I don't have compassion for your plight. I, as I've said many times on this channel, the confusion over what gender you have, if you feel like you're trapped in the wrong body, that's got to be one of the most disorienting things I could ever possibly fathom. I cannot imagine how terribly distressing that must be. And my heart goes out to you.
But to feel that for somehow my acceptance of you is the key to your happiness. Right.
Well, and it may be at times. I'm not going to lie. There are definitely psychological conditions out there that truly rely on other people, gratifying them, right? And I don't think this is really one of them, but it could be, right? It's possible. One of them is there's a gosh, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a bunch of them that are they just seek praise all the time. They always want somebody to praise them. And if you do, then, you're of course feeding into their ego and you make them feel great. Right. And if you don't, then that they're not going to feel as happy about that. But
they're going to blame you for their misery. They're going to, right. The only reason I'm unhappy is because you won't praise or accept me.
Right. And so that's one of the big differences there is whereas you feeling a certain way about your sex or about your gender or something is perfectly within your purview. You requiring the participation of others is not within your purview. That's where you cross the line, right? Just like basically every other walk of life. I'm more than I've got no problems with telling people that my name is Eddie, but nobody has to call me that. That's on them, right? That's their job. They either can or they can't. It's up to them, right? And now one of the key differences, of course, is like my name actually is Eddie, right? Like it's Edward. My parents named me Eddie, so there is a truth value there. But it doesn't stop anybody else from saying whatever they want. And I would never bother me if they didn't call me Eddie, right?
They
Even
say,
if
my
they
friends call me Phil.
yeah, like if people walked around calling me jerk, matter of fact, people do walk around calling me jerk all the time. You should just check out some of the debate forums I'm on. But the truth is, it doesn't change, how I feel about myself. I'm still going to feel the same way, right? I'm me, and it is what it is. Now, let's see let's check out some of the other comments here. Mansing says, I don't agree on the believer atheist intake. Morals don't need to be religious. Morals are with good upbringing and to do the right thing. So it's really tricky, right? Because without a moral arbiter, it's almost impossible to say what the right thing is.
Right. Because so we're political, right? We've come together to live in a country and to live in cities and to be governed. So the proper role, right? The big issue, why transgenderism is a big issue now, is because as it relates to the role of the government and the role of the government compelling people one way or the other on this issue, rather than letting everybody have make their own decision about this. The government wants to punish those that don't want to recognize somebody's subjective truth, right? Or want to, right, compel and protect certain people based on their desires, their stated desire or preference, which has reached levels that really qualify as problematic, right?
Yeah.
The number of people that used to truly be transgender, especially in men, usually we're a very, very small percentage. Usually these men, they waited until they were into their 40s where psychologists finally confirmed, all right, this is what we have to do. Now we can transition you. Now we're having young people with these boundaries, people that flip flop, they do it for a little while and they realize, oh no, I actually want to go back. This sucks, or things like that. They're not taking the time. They're being irresponsible, and they're compelled by that by the government, and by greed. Some people in that, and I think this is where we as a society have to look at and say, we need some wisdom, some time-honored wisdom, and not be tossed around on this issue, and not be forced or compelled by a new wave or relativism on this issue. That it should be okay for people to have an objective, right? Where you say an objective viewpoint, and to not be compelled to accept, enforced insanity, essentially.
Right. And see, and this is the other thing I wanted to talk about today too, is that don't get me wrong, I'm a very empathic person, right? So I've trained myself to be, especially in recent times, to worry about what other people are thinking, what they're feeling. It helps in poker a lot, like a lot. Yeah, that's how you win in poker. But it's important to note that there's always two sides to that equation, right? And people seem to only remember the side of the transgender individual, right? That it's very clear what the transgender individual would want to be called, right? Like, let's say they're a he and they say they're a she, right? They want to be called she, and it's very clear. But what isn't often so clear is that the other person they're speaking to may be, for example, a person of faith, and may have the requirement, the moral duty to only tell the truth. And so nobody thinks about how detrimental it might be to compel, say, for example, someone of Eastern Orthodox faith to lie, right? Like they don't think about that. And it's easy to see only the one side of it, right? But we should remember that there are always two sides of this coin. There are always going to be people who literally it would pain them to tell what essentially boils down to a falsehood, even if it's for the betterment of that one person's feelings. It still could be detrimental to person B's feelings, and people forget about that often. Let's see what else. So yeah,
well, right.
Tony,
There's one thing, right? Even Jordan Peterson said like that on a personal level, he would be personally compassionate to somebody and would call them by the name that they wish to be called by, things like that, if he was in their presence. But that it's inappropriate for the government to compel that, or the people use violence to compel that. That any type of and enforce that type of recognition, and that's kind of and especially to say that there's nothing problematic about, especially young people or large numbers of girls wanting to change their gender. Anyone pushing back on that and say, "Hey, maybe we should rein this in," or be very very careful about that, is shouted down, yelled at, and they want to pass laws that to force people to accept. As soon as somebody says they're any type of non-binary, then that's it. We can't question it. We have to make and they'll even take this to really absurd sort of ends, like axiomatic ends. That it could be I want to, and what it does is it degrades long proven or long fought things in societies about women having safe spaces, women's restrooms, women's locker rooms, certain things like that have not been easily won, have had to come about over time, and it's degraded those and violating those, and it doesn't matter whether it's for their sexual stimulation, right, or gratification, right? It doesn't matter any of that. If somebody just says, "I am uncomfortable. I want to be in this. I'm more comfortable. I wish I could go into this space." We're not allowed to say no, right? We're not allowed to say, well, or and that's the sort of enforced insanity where you're saying, "Look, I'm sorry that you feel that you'd be unhappy using the men's restroom, but that's what you're gonna have to deal with that, whether you feel like it's humiliating to you or not."
Are you doing the whole "I'm sorry, you're offended"? That's terrible. That's rough. Like, I'm sorry you feel that way. But yeah, no. So to answer your question, Tanya says, what truth? Their truth to a personal relationship with God, or the transgender's personal truth to themselves. So the difference is the claim in that one is claiming a personal truth and one is claiming an objective truth. And unfortunately there is no middle ground between that. I know it seems like there ought to be, right? Like we wish that there was, right? It's kind of like just in like where we're just talking about math, right? When someone presents the math problem 2 + 2 equals, right? And you're supposed to come up with the answer. While it may not be, 4 may not feel right to somebody, that doesn't change the fact that it is in fact correct. No, I'm not talking about God right now. I'm talking about the objective truth of sexes. I mean, yeah, we could tie it back into God, of course, but right now what I'm talking about is just there is an objective truth with regard to biology, and this is an objective truth, moreover, that was universally agreed upon, even without faith, for a long time. Only very, very recently has anyone even challenged this. And the funny thing, though, is as I listen to, and I've got transgender friends, and I've got trans ally friend. My sister's very, very close friends with some transgender people, and I don't think they're even challenging that their sex is different. They're just challenging that their gender is different. Now, what I haven't been able to understand yet, and if somebody out there can explain it to me, I would be grateful, is that pronouns are a pointer. They're a marker of sex, not gender. So I'm not sure why, if you're claiming, because most of these people, for example, they acknowledge that they are in fact male, or was born male, or for example, and just feel female, right? So their gender is feminine. Their gender expression is feminine, their gender roles are feminine, but they don't say that they actually are female. They're saying that they're a woman, which is the gender equivalent, right?
Well,
And
they
so
want us to acknowledge that there's no difference between them and a biological female, though. That's
they
the
would
point,
like,
right? The J.K. Rowling and so many people just want to push back ever so gently and say there is a difference between you and a natural born woman.
right. And well, see, that's the thing. Like they're not. It's like almost like they're not even saying that there is. They're saying that they're like there to be no difference, right? Like I'm sure that many of these people would like to fully like if they could somehow change their chromosomes and literally transform into a female, they would, and then that would satisfy all of the above. That may be our resolution. Our magic resolution is some kind of medical procedure that can perfectly reorient sex. I don't see that happening for a long, long time, but it's you never know, right? But
What's that certain frogs or fish will change from female to male or
yeah, right,
well,
like the from Jurassic Park.
yeah.
Side note on the, I guess, real quick tangent. I'm just going to take a second. They have actually recreated dire wolves. Have you heard about
Yeah,
this?
dire wolves and they're working on woolly mammoths. Yeah.
What?
Well, so what they are is they're wolves with some dire wolf traits. Um, some dire wolf DNA. They turned on some markers in the DNA that were unique to dire wolves, but so it's not exactly, but it is what is more interesting for more recent species that go extinct during our time that we have blood or we have recent DNA, but it's really cool. They did this from ancient DNA,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it's cool, but it's like I think I've seen this movie, and it ends with a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex chasing people around, and they're like screaming and yelling, and anyway. But anyway, sorry for the tangent. But yeah, so
I want to see saber-tooth tigers.
they're actually thinking about doing that next.
Oh, I thought it was mammoths.
I mean, well, among the things that they've got coming up the yeah. So Tanya, my question to you would be: is there anything in life that you do consider to be objectively true? Anything at all? Like, do you in your house? Do you have a wall? Do you have a ceiling? Do you have a floor? Or are those all subjective truths as well? Are you on a device right now, an electronic device, or is that a subjective truth? Like my question is where do we draw this line? Because I think a lot of people want to play the game where they only have objective truths when they want them, right? When it's a solid bedrock that they can fall back on. But then when it's something that they want to be malleable, right, which again is the definition of subjective preference, then all of a sudden all the truths just kind of like whisk away, and they're like, all right, well, this is just going to be a subjective truth from this is going to be my truth from now on, as opposed to the truth. Now, I think of for the most part, I think of most of the world as either objectively true or, if it's not an objective truth, it might be an objective truth that I don't know, right? Like I don't know the answer to.
So I want to change the focus a little bit now. And I'm interested in comments on that. What do you think the goal is of trying to make society be so malleable about the truth, right? If they can get everybody to, be on board with the trend, what's the moral goal, the outcome where it's sort of like everybody now agrees that the emperor is wearing the most beautiful clothes, even though he's walking down the street naked. But now no kids point and laugh at them. Everybody agrees to sort of put the blinders on and accept that. What is the implication for society? Is that the goal, to get society so far that it can kind of be, this is in 1984 that we can manipulate truth to what serves a purpose? Is there a moral goal or imperative for manipulating objective truth on this? That's what I'd like to see. Is there a bigger thing at play, and this is just they're using transgenderism as a touchstone to try to prey on people's compassion, prey on people, right, empathy, and take it to a point. But really, they're trying to restructure how we value and react to objective truth. Is there something deeper there?
Yeah, and I mean, well, so I would love to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? I'm a big charitable guy, and so I think that I'd like to say it didn't start that way, right?
Okay.
Maybe it's become something else, but I'd like to say it originally started with somebody truly having the desire to become treated differently in society. Now, I think what
Those were
happened
very
is,
small numbers. Yes, we have
yeah,
records
yeah.
of
And I
this.
think
Yeah.
what happened is over time they realized that they couldn't accomplish that. And so then as they tried harder and harder to accomplish their goal of being treated in a certain way, of compelling that kind of participation, then they realized that the best avenue to that end is some form of political or social power. Right. And I think that's and,
The
and, and
political
that,
power. I guess they're
but
drunk on their political power.
I want to be clear that I don't begrudge them that though, because I think that's just something that everybody would probably do in their situation, right? Like and I think it's something that everybody does do to a certain extent, with regard to their own like ideology. Like, I mean, Republicans are more than happy to push their agenda and use the political power that they wield, and Democrats do the same thing. Um, but yeah, I wish we were. Oh, thank you so much, Tanya. I wish we were able to be cognizant of that more frequently though, because I think a lot of people do acknowledge, do forget kind of the place that we're in now is a place of compulsion, right? Where it started as like this whole theory, this whole experiment started as like, I want to try to be free of something that normally I couldn't be free from, and then it turned into, as a consequence, I'm going to make somebody else less free, right? And people need to be aware that there's like I said, there's both sides to this
The
equation,
imposition. Yeah.
right? And the requirement of participation, that's a tough one. That's a tough one for me to get by. And now,
Well, I think the other question, right, we haven't really talked about is the detransitioners too, right? Who said this was a social contagion, this was an idea that infected them, and rather than taking the time to let them, right, explore this idea and confirm it, it was sort of immediately done, and then they regretted the decision and have been harmed by it. I think that's something now that has very real implications about what limits we should put on this and what sort of care. But the arguments against it, any type of limit is seen as right. Their argument is no, this will people will just kill themselves, right? And that plays upon right our fundamental Western value: murder or suicide. Human life is valuable and not worth throwing away. We don't want to just throw away human life, and
yeah,
so we're being manipulated on that. And yes, we don't want suicide, but there's long term care. Generally, all the men that or the people that would become transgender, they would only do it after many years of counseling and care, psychiatric care, to see if this was something that we're going to outgrow, something that other methods could deal with. Anything before going to this, rather than it becoming something so quick. But I think that's the manipulation is the thing I'm really worried about. That they take our underlying morality and they try to manipulate it to their ends. And I think that's what we have to be very sensitive about and aware of. But why would elites want this? Right? That's the question in common mansplaining. We're the common men. We sort of if you're an adult, you're old enough and this is something you really thought about for years and years and you want to do, right? We're gonna let you do that. This is America. Even if we don't agree with it, as long as you don't oppose upon me. But why would elites want this to become so prevalent, especially among minors, and want the numbers to go up exponentially? Is it just political power? What is it that they're trying to achieve?
right, yeah. So, Tanya, to answer your question, so I think that desire and personal preference, they don't modify reality. What they can do is sculpt like future reality, but reality itself it's kind of like, I think of it as like snapshots, right? Like large like like if you can imagine like a camera, like you take a picture, and that's what is, right? And you've got that picture in your hand. Now, no matter what you feel, no matter what you think, no matter what you desire, that picture doesn't change until you change, so you crumple it up or something, until you do something and then you've changed it. But then that's a new picture, a new snapshot of what is. All right. So yeah, I think it is true that we've defined people by their desires more recently. I'm trying to come up with a good analogy, but ultimately I keep coming back to there are various things in life that just are, right? And there's nothing that desire doesn't stop them from being. Desire might allow you to modify the future around what you would like to be, but it doesn't stop things from being. And when you make modifications, it's good to be honest about what modifications you've actually made, right? So, for example, let's say I want to learn to fly, right? Like, let's say I'm the Wrights brothers or something. There are plenty of times where they probably jumped off a roof with an insufficient plane, right? Like plenty of times where people have desired to fly while not being able to actually fly, right? And the desire to be able to fly doesn't actually change whether or not they can fly. They can either fly or they can't. Right now, it may change, over time as they build things and stuff like that. What one thing to note with regard to
biologically, we're not enabled to fly like birds or like bats.
Right. Well, and so one of the things that's kind of in a good parallel here is that we're talking about essentially technology, right? People are transitioning, they're going through surgeries and stuff like that. So it's important to be honest about what that surgery has actually accomplished, right? So if the surgery was like, for example, in this analogy, the full plane, if it was the full plane and they could actually fly now, that's the equivalent of the surgery actually making them female. But right now, that's not what the surgery is doing. What the surgery is doing is making them look like a female. It's like putting on a plain Halloween costume, right? Like, so it's important to note that underneath that Halloween costume, there's a person that still cannot fly despite the fact that the costume is on, right? And I know that I don't want to feel like I'm being harsh because I'm not trying to be, but I just don't have good language for this. But like, I just understand that we should be honest about what we're actually accomplishing as we accomplish it, right? And so, yeah, maybe there one day will be technology that will transform someone from a male into a female. And here's the next question to think about after we get there is whether or not we should, because I can see technology coming down the line that is able to change all sorts of things about humans. Like, for example, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we have some crazy maniac design a bunch of super soldiers, right? Change a bunch of humans from whatever they would have been in embryo to a little bit stronger, a little bit smarter, a little bit more athletic, a little bit
Master
more
Chief,
capable. Right, like turning them into like essentially like super immortal people, right? There's going to be all kinds of changes, and the question is, right, like in Jurassic Park, we get so excited to go ahead and do these things that we don't stop to ask ourselves, should we do these things? There is a case to be made for leaving things essentially as they are. And there's
what if the cure to cancer makes you immortal? And they say, well, we just don't want to cure cancer because then the people that we give the shot to can live forever. So we let people die of cancer. Right.
So now my brother would tell you that there's a key difference between, and that understand that he's not necessarily my morality exactly, not exactly, but we see eye to eye on a lot of things. My brother would tell you guys that there's a difference between fixing what oughtn't be there and fixing what should be there, right? So like there's a lot of things that have been around in existence for thousands and thousands of years. The male and female structure have been around for a long time and have worked very well for the propagation of the species, for the survival of the species, for the advancement of the species for a long time. They have produced a lot of well-being, right? So I would be much more hesitant to change something like that, structures that have been very effective and very helpful for a long time, than I would, for example, to change cells that obviously aren't the way that they're supposed to be, that they've become cancerous, right? Like we know what a normal cell looks like, and we know what these normal cells have looked like for a long, long time again. And so we can tell when something isn't the way that it ought to be, right? Like we can tell when something is different. You know, it's been
abnormal. Yeah.
abnormal, right? Aberrational or different, or hurtful, right? Like these are not cells that will help human beings that flourish. They will hurt human being flourishing. And so, right, it's one thing to cure something that's harmful, that's actively harmful to humans, than to like just start making changes like, hey, you don't like the fact that your eyes are blue, well, we'll just change those for no reason, right? Like it doesn't do anything for you except for
Well, all
change
right.
your eye color.
So now let's bring this back to Donald Trump, right?
Yeah. Oh
So
boy.
the Biden administration, well, in politics, the Biden administration was on board with the far left when it came to anything related to LGBTQ and trans. And their administration was pushing, there were no limits on this. And Trump has pushed back right very early on that, right, people are going to be on their IDs. The government is only going to officially recognize, right, two genders, right, and that's the sex you're assigned at birth, things like that. Why, right? And he does this. I think Trump is very attuned in reacting against elites. Why do you think he's doing this? Is it just because he opposes the political power, which is aligned with the left? Is there something else? Does he feel like this is a political aim to this? Or is there something else that he to this? What do you think Trump's motivation for being so opposed to the government getting involved or encouraging this to the level that Biden was? Why the change?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Great question. Great question. Now, I will say one of the things I wanted to talk about. I don't know how much time you've got, Christian, but
Sure.
I'm willing to hang out for a little while. I'm not going anywhere. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was, it's important for a governing leader to try to help as many people as he can, right? As he or she can. And one of the interesting things that's happening with the trans movement is that it's butting up against another civil rights movement, which is the feminist movement, right? Which is the women's rights movement. And the women's rights movement has made all these gains over time. One of them was to acquire their own place to like compete for sports. One of them is like to have their own kind of private spaces, like bathrooms and stuff like that. And it's interesting now that this is actually like in direct opposition to the trans movement. When in a lot of places they're like struggling against each other. They don't kind of want to say that they are because they're both kind of left leaning. They're both like Democrat kind of ideas. They don't want to like create a schism. But the truth is, if you find yourself in a situation where there's like a direct contradiction where you will either have men in female sports or you will not, you'll either have males in female bathrooms or you will not, then this is the law of non-contradiction. Logically, you have to do something about it to the one side or the other side. And Trump, I think, has chosen, the fact like there's like 51% of America is female, and there's only like 3% of America that's trans or something. So I think that's a no-brainer, right? Like I don't know, not saying that trans people shouldn't, be happy, but if their happiness comes at the direct expense of half of America,
Right.
I don't know. So let's see
Well, they
what.
want right. The big pattern would be, especially when the Democrats are in power, if you can claim a victim status or protected status, then nobody can say anything bad about you, right? Nobody can deny you, and that's what they wanted. And Trump, I think, is really trying to put that down. No, we're not going to be forced into that, right? We're not. You're not going to compel the government to say something, and we're going to put, very reasonable controls. That you have to wait till you're an adult before you start taking permanent
Right. Body
surgery,
damaging.
drugs, or things like that. Um, I would hope that he sees that it's a bigger moral question about our society and what our society values, that we value human life and that we value our biological gender, that we don't throw away, that we not be cavalier with it, and that we not be manipulated, and that we see through that manipulation, and that we see that the emperor, It's not wearing clothes, and we're not having our reality deliberately clouded by people insisting on a false narrative or an objective, a subjective narrative, just to virtue signal or to change or promote their left political values.
So I do want to. This is a great question. So
Sure.
Mr. Singh says, why do religious Western people believe that the universe or the Earth is around 6,000 to 10,000 years old when that is wrong? So being religious doesn't have to be right or correct. Is that correct? So lots to unpack in this one question. It's a great question, by the way. Thank you. One question. One part of this is I don't think that many people are young Earth creationists. Like not many. There are definitely some, right? They're out there, but I would say, boy, I wish I had like stats for you, like the percentage why, but it's not very high. It's more like 15 or some 10% maybe of Christians are young Earth creationists. Like very, very, very small percentage of the young Earth of the Abrahamic faith is those that believe that the Earth was 6,000 to 10,000 years old. For the most part, the I don't think it's a good idea to take the Bible and look at it like it's a textbook, right? It's not really supposed to be like a scientific text. It's not really it's supposed to be the kind of thing where you look at it and you're like, see, this wasn't exactly chemically correct, like this wasn't an exact physics mixture, this reaction wasn't exactly the way. This isn't, you can't look at the timeline, count up all their years and know exactly how old the Earth is as a consequence. For the most part, most of the Christians that I know assume that Adam isn't even the first person. He's just the first person with an immortal soul, right? So he's like the first person that God breathed life into, as opposed to just being like an animal, right.
Yeah,
So
the creative periods, right? The days are the times we think of creative periods, and whether those creative periods were in our reckoning hundreds of millions of years or not doesn't matter if it was God, creating it and bringing about His purposes.
Right. And now the other part of this question that I wanted to get into actually is whether or not religion has to be right or wrong. Now I'm going to give you a spicy take. Right. This is going to be my Edward Paul. This is my belief and my belief alone.
The gospel community.
I believe, first of all, I believe that many religions are in fact wrong. Right. Probably most of them. Right. I think there's probably, if there is a correct religion, there's only one.
Yep.
Almost certainly, if there is one. Now, I will also say with regard to the Bible or something like that, I would say that I think that there's probably at least some truth value to every line in the text. Now, that doesn't mean that it has 100% of every type of truth value at all times, right? So, like, if you read a statement in the Bible, I think a lot of them are allegorical, right? When Jesus says, I am the vine, he doesn't in fact mean that he is a plant, right? Like he's not saying not everything is going to be like botanical in nature, for example, or biological in nature, chemical in nature. I think that every narrative in there is more about storytelling. It's about a story that will teach us the path than it's a great quote from The Matrix. There's a difference between knowing the path and walking the path, right? And sometimes they're even at odds with each other. Sometimes you can know the path and knowing it keeps you from walking it. And sometimes walking the path, you basically have to stay in the dark. So it's kind of an interesting little but yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you so much for that. I do agree that we should drink water. Water is really good.
I think religion is important to help us know that God loves us, right? Has a plan for us, has given us laws, but also has given us a chance to make decisions for ourselves and decide whether we want to follow Him and have faith in Him, or to follow be enticed by other compelling arguments of our day, and whether we want to follow those. Now, Eddie and I have chosen that we're going to try to take the path of faith, and as much as we can. Doesn't mean we're perfect at it, but our worldview is shaped by that God loves us and has a plan for his children, wants his children to come back with them with the experience they gain here in life. I think that's it for me tonight.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to hang out for a little while because we're having a good conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, thanks so much, Christian. All right, so give Christian a round of applause. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm going to hang out for a little while because I'm having fun. So, Tanya, to answer your question, yes, I have read other religious texts. I don't know that I'm pronouncing them all correctly, but like I've read a lot of the old Babylonian texts. I've read some of I think it's called Bhagavad Gita. It's like a Hinduist text, and some other. When I actually, believe it or not, I was raised Catholic. In the Catholic faith, they require before you when you become a man, like you become you're kind of like passing of rights is something called confirmation. They actually require you to go to check out other faiths. They make you do it. They make you test your faith and like go to, every temple that you can go to, any synagogue that you can go to, and just check everything out before you're sure that you want to be a warrior in Christ and so forth. And I went to as many as I could. I didn't get to, all, but I tried 8 or 10 different things. There's some really interesting faiths out there. Catholics always struck me as kind of, what's the right word for it? They're very reverent, but as a consequence, they're all kind of somber, so it was like, I'd go to other churches and they'd be like singing and stomping and shouting, and it's like, man, like, why can't we be this excited about, God? But, it was to each their own. I think that there is a value in reverence. So there's something interesting to go there. Let's see. What about the Tripitaka? I don't know that one. So is that the Buddhist text? I'll have to check it out. But yeah, there are absolutely truths in every text. Every text, like even stuff that's designed to be a falsehood, there's usually truths in the the inversion of it, right? Like you could read things like Mein Kampf or something from Hitler, and you could still find truths in there, right? They're not going to be the truths that Hitler wants you to learn because, for obvious reasons, he lost his path. But you can find information and wisdom in everything. Why do I think that there are truths in every text? Or why do I think that? Maybe rephrase that one. I think that there are truths in mankind because mankind has just learned wisdom over years. I think that there are a lot of different places where mankind has chosen to record. I mean, I find truths in there are great truths in novels. There are great truths in Tale of Two Cities or of Mice and Men or things like that. Some of them are subjective and some of them are objective, right? Some of them are almost always true, right? Like there's you were looking for the middle ground. There's a lot of truths that are like almost always the case. Something to the effect of if you can learn to present yourself with discipline, if you can learn to try to delay instant gratification, that you'll often come out with better reward. That's like a truth that's almost always true. It's not 100% of it. I mean, there's plenty of people that get lucky and the greatest reward that they could ask for is just laid out at their feet and just handed right to them. If so, yeah. I mean, well, that's modal logic, right? So that's I don't know how much you know about modal logic, but basically there are if-then statements. So you could say if you exercise, then you will get in better shape, something like that, right? It's an if-then. So that does, of course, automatically incorporate that if you don't, you will not gain the benefit of what you're talking about. Now, you can obviously still get in shape without exercising, and you can manage to lose condition, even though you exercise like crazy. So that's not what I would call a universal truth, but there are lots of modal truths that are one of, for example, if you add 2 to 2, you will get 4, right? That's basically a 100% across the board. It'll always happen if you do it correctly. If you add mathematics together correctly, you will get the answer. That's a classic one. I think that there are a lot of math is kind of funny to me because it's an abstraction in and of itself, right? So, one might ask the question, what's more real in this world? Is it the thing that you're abstracting from or the thing that you're abstracting to, right? So, like, math is essentially founded on set theory, and set theory is like what mankind originally discovered. Again, I would say discovered because they were trying to track, for example, food patterns, and they're like, how many gazelle do I need to feed my family, et cetera. And so, how long does it take the gazelle to return? Number of suns, number of moons. So these are all sets, right? So they're coming up with the basis of mathematics in set theory. Now, that having been said, like, I think that there are things called transcendental categories, right? There are things that are basically that are outside of the realm of something that a man would make. They're just there, right? One thing that we talk about in our debate forum a lot is that I bring up all the time is circularity, right? So while a human could create individual circles or representations of circles, the concept of circularity is not native to humans, right? It's native to the universe. It was just there long before we were there. And it had nothing to do with mankind, but circularity exists whether humans are around or not. Let's see. Mr. Sin says Hecking Cruz is a symbol used in Mein Kampf. It was a religious person, Christian, who translated the book in English. Yep, and replaced it with the word swastika that's still used in the West. Yeah, very true. Yeah. So being religious doesn't make one good or bad. Not being religious. Yeah. No. It's so well. The word religious is kind of a funny word too. So it's like I don't even know what that means exactly. Religious. I know that what people think it means is to be one who believes in higher powers or like gods or God. I don't. I don't know that I agree with that definition. I think that if you like look up religion on Google, the definition that comes up is something to the effect of like ardent belief in a system of beliefs or values or something like that. I mean, I could punch it up in a second, find out, but let's see, religion definition. So yeah, like the first definition is what most people think it is, the belief and worship in superhuman powers or supernatural powers. But then the second one is a particular set of system of faith and worship. And the third one is a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes. So, like, those are very generic. I don't know. I think what most people mean when they talk about religion, they're talking about that first definition. But I think that there are all sorts of worldviews, and they all qualify as religion to me, right? Like, for example, I would call atheism a form of religion. I would call existentialism a form of religion. I would call hedonism a form of religion. I would call, like all these are essentially religions to me. They're systems of belief. Now, there are going to be varying differences between some, but I mean, as Mr. Singh pointed out earlier, there are differences between, any two people in church. So it's like just belief that, like if you were to walk into a Catholic church today, you're still going to find a wide variety of beliefs. Now, you will find some similarities across the board. And I think the same is true, for example, of atheism. I think you're going to find this wide variety of beliefs, but you are going to find similarities across the board. And so I think that to be religious, you're absolutely right. That doesn't make you right or wrong, good or bad. I think being right or wrong, good or bad, makes you right or wrong, good or bad. But the way that you would know is impossible without a moral arbiter, right? So you would still need someone, something to tell you that you are, in fact, doing the right thing. Otherwise, your preference will never be defendable against any other preference, right? One thing that we were talking today, so a moral center could be a lot of different things. It's a great question, right? What's a moral center? It could be a lot of different things. It could be God. It could be a giant stone tablet. It could be a million different things. It could be whatever you find in your faith to be a moral center. One thing that Tanya and I have been discussing as a potential moral center is like a collaboration of all the humans on Earth. Would be nice to see if we could get everybody together and come up with a nice a nice a list of things that are good and a list of things that are bad. Now, the trouble with using human beings as moral guides, even in groups, is that they will come up with things that are quite often what I believe to be mistaken, right? And I think it's pretty clear that they're mistaken. One example is the one we talked about today, right? So, for example, you can track even let's say we pretended like there was no religion here, no faith, no God, no nothing. We just ignored it all, and the only thing we went on is like human well-being, right? That's our goal. We want human flourishing to be our goal, and so we check our actions against that goal to see if it's moral, right? Um, if you look at, for example, the statistics behind transgenderism, they're very, very poor with the eye toward human well-being, right? The suicide rates are very high. The chance of producing offspring is almost non-existent. The When you do produce offspring and you raise it, you have like the kids will almost always have, for example, higher income mobility, higher education, higher pro-social attitudes when they're to a male and female nuclear family household than any other version, right? Then there are studies to back this up. So then the question is, right, is it good to be transgender? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. It's a tough question, but ultimately, like if you were to track it on any kind of metric that I can come up with, it doesn't come out very well. So then the question is, what are we using to overcompensate for all of those other metrics that we've got? What are we using to say, forget all that, forget about human well-being, we still think that this is right? What are we using to do that? What moral center, what moral arbiter are we using to say, this should be good anyway? I don't know. That's a really complicated question. I think that it's dangerous to think that humans get the answer right all the time, because we make mistakes all the time. Where these studies, some of them are. Yeah, I can send you a bunch of them, Tanya. When we're done, I'll send you a bunch of them. They're all over the place, and just like any study on Earth, there's huge numbers of these studies. There's huge spectrums from everything from like really well done studies measuring objective data points with blinds and controls to slightly less to like stuff. A lot of this stuff is like just survey. That's one of the problems I found with transgenderism and studies in general, is that the bulk of the studies that would show that transgenderism is a boon for society are like very, very poor. Those particular studies are all like surveys. They're like questionnaires, right? And so they'll ask people, for example, after they transition, well, do you feel better? And the person's like, yeah, I feel great. And it's like, okay, great. Like that's the whole point of that study, is to just ask them a question. But then the bigger studies, the ones that have more objective data points, for example, will and the ones that have these, like there's a study, for example, in Switzerland, I believe, that measures decades of data and like hundreds of people. And instead of asking them how they feel, I mean, it does ask them how they feel, but instead of just doing that, it actually checks to see who's actually committing suicide, who's actually arrived on the FBI database for committing crimes, who's actually, so like it's one thing to say, yeah, I feel great, but then if you end up killing yourself in like a couple of more years anyway, then it's like, did you actually feel great, or did you feel great temporarily, or did you feel, like it's one of those things where it's like there's a big difference between stated preference and revealed preference, right? On the one side, you've got people that are going to say certain things. One of the things that comes with transgenderism, an interesting phenomenon, is that there's like this huge community around it, right? And they're very welcoming, and that's a good thing, right? Welcoming communities are great. But because of that welcoming community, it will often throw a false positive in the first couple of years after somebody transitions. You'll say, hey, how do you feel? And they'll be like, well, I feel great. Now I'm part of this brand new community. They love me and they take care of me and they welcome me to the group, right? And then 2 years later, they realize that the transition didn't solve anything, and that despite all of the welcome that those communities showed, they're still not feeling very good psychologically, and that's it breaks my heart. But it's like, meanwhile, we sold them essentially this lie that this was going to solve all their problems, and then they go find out that it didn't, and then then there's trouble with suicide. And guys, I can't tell you how much again, it distresses me to see that. But meanwhile, I'm trying to limit the number of suicides. I'm trying to limit the number of the amount of suicidality, the amount of ideation. I don't want any of that stuff to happen. I'd never want people to hurt themselves, right? Like, that's worst case scenario for me. Let's see. Mr. Singh says, in that sense, everyone is a sinner. We breathe. Breathing kills time. Yeah. Yes, that's very true. So the gods that came before us as a human, we're sinning. Now, one thing I'll say about this, you're kind of getting into what is called the problem of animal suffering, right? And it's like a subset of the problem of evil. I don't know exactly where I stand on this yet. I'll have to think about it for a while and ponder it. But in the Christian faith, which is where I'm from originally, they'll tell you that there's essentially no sin in killing tiny organisms by accident, right? Like, it's one of those things where it's just animals are essentially here on earth for mankind, and as long as you're a good steward of it, as to the best of your ability, you're probably okay. I think that's probably kind of sort of right to the extent that it can be. I don't know that I mean, obviously I am opposed to the kind of like cattle slaughter that goes on in our cattle farms today. Like, a lot of the ways that we treat our animals is kind of abysmal. Um, and I should be more staunch in my reaction to that, but like, I end up going to the grocery store and eating whatever I eat anyway, and I just don't think about it. I should be better about that, so I'll admit that one. But yeah, ultimately, I think that there's only so much that you can do. I don't think that, like, we talked about this earlier, asking the ants permission to build a highway. I don't think that that's feasible. We would just never end up building highways. We'd never get to build roads. We'd never get to build anything because we would, for fear of killing, mosquitoes or something. Good grief. I might actually actively go out and kill mosquitoes if I have the chance. Those things are a nuisance. So let's see. Connection, humans seek all the time. Yeah. Yeah. See, connection, I think connection is of huge paramount importance, but I don't think that you need to change your gender to do it. I disagree with that philosophy. I think that a lot of the times when we're talking about transgenderism, you end up having people who they're confused, they're depressed, and they're in a weird place in their lives. And so they think that the best way to solve the problem is this, right? And they don't have another answer. And I think with the proper guidance, they'd have other answers. I think that's part of the problem. And part of the problem is they're getting weird information from other people. Like, this has turned into at least partially a social contagion, right? It's turned into a situation where everybody thinks that's the answer now, right? That's like the in fad answer. And so that when you get to those awkward years and you're depressed and you're feeling left out and you're like, well, what can I do? And then you've got three friends that are all like, well, we transitioned and it felt great. And it's like, well, okay. But that's the social aspect of this. You're never going to be able to take it all away. It's impossible. All right. So Mr. Singh says, the only reason I raised this is because you said morally being religious is right. No, that's not what I said. I apologize if it sounded like that. What I said was, you need a moral arbiter to have a justification for doing any one moral thing over another. All right. And that isn't to say that that's the only way to do things. I mean, there's lots of ways to to do things, and there's a lot of moral relativists out there that will fight this tooth and nail. Like Sam Harris is one. He's the one that would probably argue with me. Sam Harris is kind of a weird situation because he's a moral objectivist, but he doesn't believe in God. So he's like trying to thread the needle, right? But yeah, just so I'm clear, there's nothing that I never said anything about needing to be religious to be moral. In fact, there are many people who are, I guess, what you would call although with my definition of religion, everybody's religious technically, but there are people who would be called non-religious who are probably better people than I am in the abstract, right? I've got plenty of sins on my conscience. Now, but there are also, on the conversely, there are plenty of people who are supposedly very, very devout, and yet they don't walk their faith, right? They just, it's like, what do they call them? I don't know. I forget what they call, like, they're like, Christians in name only, sort of, some kind of like false. Oh yeah, Tanya, I've got plenty of. I do my best every day, but I fall short every day. Every day, there's things that I could do better. One of the reasons, in fact, that I started this channel was because I looked at my life and I said, I could be doing more. That's just I before this I was like just sitting at home every day, minding my own business. I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't like going around robbing convenience stores or something like that. It wasn't like going around hurting people, but I didn't do much to help anybody that wasn't like my family or my friends. It was just kind of like a lonely existence for the most part. Me and my chica that I had for a while, and then so I would just sit around and just just collect money from my job, and that was it. And every now and then I'd go hang out with the family, and I'd bring gifts when I went to my family's house, but that was it. So this is my one of my goals with this channel is for to have me get out there and do something that I think is best suited to my talents. What's this reminds? Oh, of here, this one right here. That's actually a picture of me and my son. I don't know if you can see my son, but he was like a little baby at the time. He's adorable. I don't know where he gets it from because his father certainly isn't. And then I have my daughters on the other side. I can't see her, but that's her. That's both of them actually. That was a really cute picture. And then my dragon. He's fierce. But yeah. But anyway, you guys got anything else for me? It's kind of dwindled down. We only got like 3 or 4 participants now, but you guys have been great. You guys are awesome. Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. I really do. Yeah, they're amazing. I don't know. Every day I wonder what I did to deserve them, and I'm trying to get down to them. I'm trying to get down to Florida. So all of your super chats are going toward my my journey, trying to get this house fixed up so that I can get down to Florida, and that's been like my entire goal since I started this. I have a couple of properties in the area, and so I've been trying to fix everything up. I got 2 of the 3 fixed up, and then the third one's been giving me trouble. It's like every time I peel a layer away, and I find out, that 3 more large scale repairs need to be done. So it's a nightmare. But anyway, you guys were awesome today. Thank you so much for watching. And catch me on Saturday. Catch us on Saturday. Common Mansplaining will be back. Thank you so much for your participation, and we'll catch you next time. Common Mansplaining.